TikTok, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. Robert and I here, we keep saying, keep hoping that there will not be a show because there's no jihad. There's always jihad. It's relentless. 14 centuries. Show me a week without jihad.
There is no such week. I can find no such week, David.
No, indeed.
No, indeed.
No week, indeed. We can't find a week, ladies and gentlemen, for 14 centuries. We can't find a week without jihad. But even though it's been going on for 14 centuries without 1 second's break for anyone in the world, it's somehow all in our minds. All right, Robert. Well, if anyone's tuning in for the first time, why don't you go tell everyone about yourself real quick before we get started here?
Me? I am Robert Spencer, director of Jihad Watch and author of The Critical Quran.
And the history of jihad as well.
And the history of jihad.
So
and the truth about Muhammad and did Muhammad exist.
We are literally live with the man who wrote not only the Quran, but also the entire history of jihad.
There is no other history of jihad. This is the one. When someone once approached Muhammad and said, what is the greatest history of jihad? Can you find any other book other than Spencer's History of Jihad? And Muhammad said, I can find no such book. There is no other history of jihad. This is the one.
By the way, Robert, people won't know what you're alluding to there, so why don't you tell them real quick?
Yes, there's a famous hadith in which Muhammad is depicted as being asked by one of his followers, can you tell me a deed that is greater than jihad? And Muhammad says, I can find no such deed.
No such deed. No, indeed.
Oh, indeed.
No, that has a ring to it. That could be like the chorus of a song. No such deed. No, indeed. No such deed. No, indeed. Huh?
Jihad rap.
There we go. The jihad rap. All right. So jihad is absolutely relentless, and it doesn't ever even what you know what would be cool if we were actually successful eventually in stopping the jihad so that you could write a complete history of jihad and then it's done, right? It's like this was all the jihad ever, because right now you're writing a book and then like the book, it's always like, okay, the book finishes here, but then the next week there's, right after the book comes out, there's still like tons of jihad happening. So it's not a complete, you can't have a complete history.
You're right, David. As a matter of fact, I would like to actually issue a request to all those who are watching this right now, that any of you who are in your 20s now, but you are already aware of this problem, I ask you, take my book, The History of Jihad, and around 2072, update it. And give us a new edition. I'm giving you my permission right now. You can make it The History of Jihad, revised by Spencer and your name here. And you can bring us up to date. But then you will also have to pass on this work to someone else younger than yourself. And it will go on through the generations from there.
I think we might stop it by 2072, though.
You think so?
Yeah, people might wise up by then. Ladies and gentlemen, the links to the Critical Quran and the history of jihad and Robert's website, Jihad Watch, are all in the description box, so be sure to get those. So if you really want to understand jihad, you have to know the history of jihad. But as we just said, it's incomplete because as soon as Robert puts out a book, the jihad continues. Well, that's why you go to his site, Jihad Watch, and then you're up to date. You're totally up to date then. So read the history of jihad and get the Critical Quran. Then you understand underlying foundation of jihad, then you got the history of it, and then you have the most up-to-date information about it from his website. So you have all those links there. Be sure to grab that. All right, now Robert, we always say we're hoping there's no jihad, but I happen to know there's been some jihad because I've seen it, and the thing I've seen most over the past few days is a story about a tailor who was I haven't read up on it or something like that. This is just based on tweets, so I'm getting the information from you here. Sound like a tailor. A tailor had said something supporting Nupur Sharma and was brutally murdered for it. That's what I gathered.
Yes, that's basically it. That he had expressed support. Kanhaiya Lal had expressed support on social media for Nupur Sharma, who is, of course, the famous, now internationally famous, former spokeswoman for the BJP party, the ruling party in India. And she was on television recently noting that Muhammad married a child, which is, of course, undoubtedly true from the Islamic sources, and it has been accused of blasphemy for saying this, which is extraordinary and revealing and important, because it makes it clear that it's not that they can't possibly say that she's lying about Muhammad. The problem is that she was not approving of what Muhammad did. If she had said, Muhammad married a child, isn't that wonderful? We should all marry children. Then nobody would have been upset. But she said, what if I were to make fun of this? And so the idea behind all these riots, and now the killing of Kanhaiya Lal, is to drive home the point that the non-Muslims must not speak in any remotely critical manner about Muhammad, even if everything they say is accurate. And so, yes, these two Muslims went into his tailor shop in the middle of the day in a crowded area and asked him for work. He's going about his business. They caught all this on video. He's measuring them, and then they begin to attack him. Terrible, harrowing video, because he's screaming as they're cutting his throat, and they behead him in accord with, of course, Quran 47:4, when you meet the unbelievers, strike the necks. Now, Kanhaiya Lal had nothing to do with Nupur Sharma, and he didn't even express anything about Muhammad himself. All he did was express solidarity with her. And so, once again, driven home is the point that there is nothing that is tolerable from non-Muslims except total obsequious acquiescence, submission, and unbridled praise. It's a hallmark of dhimmitude throughout history. If you read the history of jihad, that the non-Muslims are never to speak about their plight, never to complain about the situation of deprivation and harassment that they have been subjected to. If they do, it'll get even worse for them. They have to say everything's great. And that's the only thing that's acceptable for them to say. And that the Muslims are wonderful and they get along beautifully with them. And you still find dhimmi Christians and others saying this to this day. This gentleman did not, and he was beheaded for it.
So, Nupur Sharma, sorry, still trying to get over a cold. Nupur Sharma, whose religious beliefs were being insulted, said in response, hey, I could insult your religion too by pointing out the fact that your prophet had sex with a little girl. Totally true. Factually verifiable information there. And massive uproar over it. And then a tailor was killed for basically doing exactly what Robert and I did, namely point out, okay, well, she's got a point there. She's right. She hadn't said anything wrong. And guy got killed over that. I've noticed, Robert, because notice, I mean, a bunch of people over here, you have agreed that Nupur Sharma is correct. I've said Nupur Sharma is correct. AP has said Nupur Sharma is correct. Um, the most we get is like some whining online lately. It seems like wherever the jihadis are in the world, they're aware of what they can get away with and what will work in a certain situation, right? Like when Nupur Sharma said that, there are places in the world where if she said something like that, there would be nothing anyone could do about it. But they understood that this is India and that India has a lot of delicate relations with many Muslim countries in terms of importing oil and sending workers to these other countries. So they understood, hey, if we create an uproar here, we can actually get this government to back down. And they did. They were right. And then, I mean, think about this. A tailor, I mean, some random tailor, you go after him. Why? Well, that's an area where you can still get away with intimidating people. You can still actually intimidate people into silence, whereas that wouldn't work in certain other parts, and they don't try it over there. But it is just this, there's this interesting awareness of what can we get away with here that will further the goals of Sharia, and how far can we go and actually accomplish something. The same thing in the UK with Hatun Tash. Hatun was on with me yesterday, and we talked about what happened to her, and you're aware of that. But it's the same idea there. It's every week at Speaker's Corner, they're testing what they can get away with in terms of the police. And then, oh, we got away with that. Oh, we ran up and stole her Quran and we got away with it. Oh, we stole her Quran again. Oh, we got away with it. Oh, the police are arresting her because we came at her. Huh. Well, notice that's just the police are constantly sending the jihadi community more information on what they can get away with. They're saying, hey, if you want to do this, we're going to let you do it, or we'll even support you. That sends a message to them. Okay, this is what we can get away with. So each week they're trying to push a little more and a little more. But that's part of what we're talking about when we're talking about jihad just being relentless. Historically, jihadis only stop when they're stopped by someone who makes them stop, someone that they just cannot defeat. That's when they stop and they regroup and they try other tactics and so on. But even in a situation where, I mean, the most powerful nations in the world by far are not Muslim nations. And with the internet, we can spread all sorts of information about Islam very quickly and very easily. You've got the avalanche of apostasy, but still notice they're still trying every single day. What can we actually accomplish? What can we get away with? And you get different answers, what you can get away with in India and what you can get away with in another place. But yep, definitely seems relentless, Robert.
No doubt about that. Relentless. Actually, when I was putting together the history of jihad, that's exactly the impression I got. That this is a force that is absolutely relentless over 1,400 years, never giving up, never giving ground. A couple of places here and there being defeated, but for the most part, just continuing relentlessly, inexorably to advance. But this has always been, and I took care to point this out in the book, this has always been because of infidels who, for various reasons, for short-sighted reasons of short-term expediency or advantage, give the jihadis a leg up and aid them in their efforts. If infidels are not doing that, then there's no advance. And so that is a very important lesson for the modern age that the modern age doesn't seem interested in learning, but there it is.
And we're the bad guys, ladies and gentlemen. We're the bad guys. We're pointing it out. All right, what else you got? I know that wasn't the only jihad that's happened.
Unfortunately, there's quite a lot, David. It was a very busy week for the jihad. And the second biggest story of the week comes out of Norway. We were talking last week quite a bit about cracks in the leftist jihadist alliance. And those have continued to show most vividly in Oslo, where a Muslim migrant screaming, what was he screaming, David?
Off the top of my head, small chance of being right, but I would guess Allahu Akbar.
I don't know how you do it. It's uncanny, really.
It's luck,
But
just pure luck, I guess.
yeah, you're really on a streak here because you haven't gotten one wrong yet.
I should go on
It's
Jeopardy. I mean, every time we have a show, you'll ask me like 10 questions. I'll nail them all. Knowing absolutely nothing, I'll nail them all. And I'm like, I need to go on Jeopardy because I would crush that show and be able to
right.
support my work for the rest of my life off my winning streak.
We still have to do the Jihad Jeopardy show, but
Oh,
in
yeah,
any
I keep
case,
forgetting that. Jihad Jeopardy. That's a good name for it.
anyway, seriously, the Muslim screaming Allahu Akbar was at a. I'm trying to find the details here. Oh yes, the London pub, which is apparently a gay nightclub. He murdered 2 people. He wounded 21 outside this place, and this is described. This place describes itself as the largest gay and lesbian venue in Oslo, and so this does seem to have been a particularly targeted attack on gays, as the Pulse nightclub attack is represented as being, but was not actually, in fact. And the most important aspect of this, aside from the actual murders, is the fact that the Pride Parade was canceled. And so I think this is how you change the culture of a nation. That you come in and do this, and then what they do is curtailed as a result, and you keep on doing that, and they curtail more and more of their behavior. And finally, nobody even remembers how things used to be. And you have transformed the society utterly. And so, whatever one thinks about gay pride parades, and so on, I thought this was a fascinating case because of that. That pretty soon Norway will be very different within a very few years, and probably very few Norwegians realize this. But within a very few years, Norway will be a radically different place from what it is now. And I think one of the watershed events in that transformation will turn out, will be regarded, future historians will look back and say the cancellation of the Pride Parade after the shooting in 2022 was a turning point, because it showed Norway giving way and changing its own behavior in order to accommodate the jihadis. Instead of saying, we're going to stand up, we're going to send the Pride Parade out with armed guards and make sure it happens, they're saying, you can commit violence against us and we will submit. And so there are going to be plenty more chances for the Norwegians to submit, and many more invitations for them to do so from the jihadis.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it a million times. Anytime the jihadis say, "Hey, we're going to kill you over this," and you say, "Oh, okay, we'll change our minds on that," then you haven't stopped the violence. You just encouraged the violence. You just told them how to beat you. And as far as attacking gay nightclubs, because this is as you pointed out, this has happened multiple times now. There could be multiple reasons for that. It could just be, hey, it could be someone who just hates gay people for religious reasons, but also there are jihadis who want to avoid even the possibility of killing fellow Muslims. Some jihadis regard it as acceptable collateral damage. Like, as long as you're targeting the infidel, if you end up killing some fellow Muslims or something like that, they regard it as okay. Like Al Qaeda believed it was okay to bomb a building or something like that, even though there may be Muslims inside, because it's collateral damage. You're intending on killing someone else. But other Muslims want to be very careful about that, so they target people where they're not going to find any actual devout Muslims, and that's why you'll find them targeting like the Ariana Grande concert years back, thinking to themselves, hey, not going to be any serious devout Muslims coming out of an Ariana Grande concert. And then of course same thing with the nightclubs. But yeah, multiple possible reasons for jihadis to target that. One quick comment, Robert. This is just funny.
Yes.
Fatima Williams says, sad that you gotta attempt to destroy Islam, because more and more people are discovering that Islam is the true religion that follows the teachings of Jesus and Moses, etc. Fatima, what planet do you live on? I mean, which Muslim? I mean, Zakir Naik, all these guys right now, they're all warning Muslims about the avalanche of apostasy that they're caught in the middle of. So many people are leaving Islam right now. 24% of Muslim youth are leaving Islam, and that's it's this is what you're looking at. It's accelerating. It's accelerating. Why? Because people are actually getting accurate information about it, and they're finding out there's no way this guy's a prophet. You live in fantasy land. You're caught. I mean, like this is like what I would expect from like 30 years ago, where people are just getting information from Zuckernack and they're not getting any response to it. They're not doing any studying and so on. But to say this now in the middle of the avalanche of apostasy, when I mean Muslims are literally, I mean Muslim speakers and leaders are literally losing their minds in a panic mode because they can't figure out how to stop this avalanche. And you're here bragging, oh, Islam's spreading because people are discovering that it follows the teachings of Jesus. Really? Jesus, who said he's going up to Jerusalem to die on the cross? That's what Islam is following? Come on. Be serious here. All right, back to you, Robert. We got some jihad.
That's incidentally, you're absolutely right. That is what people were saying to me 30 years ago.
Exactly.
And that back then it was quite plausible. As a matter of fact, my very first book was called Islam Unveiled, and I submitted it to the publisher, called it Islam Unveiled 10 Myths About Islam Exposed. And the publisher thought that was too strong. I don't know why, but in any case, he changed it to Disturbing Questions About the World's Fastest Growing Faith. And in 2001, 2002, that is indeed how people regarded it. But now, well, there was no avalanche of apostasy at that time, at least not in any open way.
Yeah, and you had the situation you had even back then was you had Pew Research saying that Islam's the world's fastest growing religion and so on, and people saw that, you see how fast it's growing, it must be because people are realizing that it's the truth about Jesus. No, it was birth rates because of all the third world countries where Muslims just had the highest birth rates. That's why the number was blowing up.
Well, if you have wives and 25 children, you're going to raise the birth rate.
Yep, and so then what do you have? Well, you had the internet. You had the internet, and as soon as we started spreading information on the internet, you can actually go back to one of my earliest articles from probably 2005 or something like that, when I wrote an article called "Islam Beheaded: The Information Superhighway and the Death of Mohammedanism," and I said this internet here, where we can now get information into the houses of Muslims who've been shielded from this information for 14 centuries, is going to destroy Islam. And here we are, not too long after, and and we've got an avalanche.
Well, maybe you were right all along. Anyway, more cracks in the edifice. The leftist Islamic Alliance. There's been quite a lot here during Pride Month, and we have one out of Australia that I thought was interesting. This Salafi scholar Wissam Haddad, who goes by Abu Usaid, and he preached a sermon at the Al Madina Dawa Center in Sydney, Australia. And he said that Muslims who claim that homosexuality is permitted in Islam are sick people and apostates who are heading for hell. And he said, in Islam, we do not hide from the fact that homosexuality under the Sharia, after being judged with the Quran and the Sunnah by an Islamic judge in an Islamic court in Islamic lands, is punishable by death. Now, this is something that, of course, you know and I know, and many people who are watching this know. But since we're talking about the past, it's also worth noting that in the 1990s and in the early 2000s, right after 9/11, it was very easy to find Islamic apologists and Islamic spokesmen saying just what this fellow is saying is wrong, saying that Islam does not condemn homosexual activity. Islam does not condemn apostasy. Neither of these things are really punishable by death. This is an invention of Islamophobes, and so on. This was very common. And you did not see people like this Haddad saying that actually Islam does call for death for this. It's only in recent years that we have started to see people like this gentleman speak more honestly about Islamic teaching and not just say, oh, this is something these Islamophobes are making up. And I think that's a function of something you've referred to in earlier shows, David, that as the numbers of Muslims grow, then you have a transition from the period in which tolerance is preached, a la the Meccan passages of the Quran, and consequently, there's an attempt to show that Islam is benign and nothing to be concerned about. And then it changes with the growth of Islam in a particular area, and people begin to be more assertive and more honest about what it actually teaches.
Yeah, and so the result is yes, everything that we were saying Islam teaches 15 years ago. Just I mean, keep in mind that is a very short period of time, but 15 years ago, everything that we were saying Islam teaches, we were called liars and bigots and Islamophobes for pointing it out, and now you have very popular Muslim leaders saying the exact same things. They're confirming exactly what we said 15 years ago when they called us liars for saying it.
Exactly.
No, indeed.
Yes. No, indeed. Yes. I really got to get the T-shirts made. But in any case, uh, in the meantime, David, there is no shortage of the same kind of willfully ignorant and self-deluded governing officials. And so while Muslim leaders are becoming more honest and open about what Islam teaches, the same denial and willful ignorance nonetheless prevails in all too many areas. And so a story came out of Britain. Shabir Ahmed, who was the leader of the Rochdale rape gang, was identified in a report that came out last week as a local council's welfare rights officer. And the police knew, while he was the local council's welfare rights officer, that he was also the leader of the local rape gang. But they did not bother to inform the local council that was employing him as a welfare rights officer that he was also involved in this unsavory behavior on the side. And obviously, everybody concerned in this story was motivated by the fear of being called Islamophobic.
Yeah, I talked about that with Hatun, with her getting robbed on camera, multiple camera angles. Guy wasn't even trying to hide it. He knew he was being recorded. He thinks it's worth it to steal a Quran from Hatun, and then police come and arrest Hatun. Right? It's not, hey, let's go over there and let's examine the video footage and see what happened. It's okay. Let's just get this over with and arrest Hatun, and then the Muslims there will cheer for us. I pointed out that it's the exact same mentality as you had with the grooming gangs. It's we're so terrified of being called Islamophobes that we'll throw other people under the bus. In the case of the grooming gangs, let's throw tens of thousands of little girls under the bus, even though they're being, groomed, drugged, raped, gang raped, pimped, and so on. And let's just throw all of them under the bus so that we don't get called Islamophobes. But they'll do the same thing. Here's Toon Tosh, and she's been hit, stabbed, everything else on camera. But if we have to decide between going after her or being called Islamophobes by going after the people who are actually doing this stuff, we'd rather just throw Hatun under the bus and lock her up.
Easier to arrest her, too, than to arrest a whole group of angry young men who were probably stronger, younger, tougher than the police themselves.
Yeah, and notice pretty straightforward to go over there and say, hey, I know everyone's recording on your camera phones. Show me who took her stuff. Right there. I mean, this is like a detective's dream, right? I mean, committing crimes with multiple camera angles and photographs of the guy can be pulled up within seconds. And it's it's too much work. We don't want to do that. We'll just lock her up.
It doesn't fit the narrative. It's not. It can't it doesn't coincide with official Britain's construct of reality that Muslims would be bothering Hatun. Hatun bothering them, sure, that makes sense to them. So they go with that. They don't need any evidence. We don't need no stinking badges. That's a reference from a movie from the 40s. Never mind. Now, uh, meanwhile, in Germany,
Wait, what did you say? Just repeat what you
we,
said.
we don't got to show you no stinking
Oh, I remember.
badges.
That's Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
You are correct, sir.
Yeah.
Once again, you have shown you're gonna clean up on Jihad Jeopardy. Although I'm
Yeah.
not sure there's gonna be a whole lot of questions about treasure from the Sierra Madre but you
Yeah.
never know. Meanwhile, in Germany, and is a researcher on Islam, a non-Muslim, who researches about jihad violence, Suzanne Schroeter. She heads the Frankfurt Research Center Global Islam, and heads up is actually part of an expert group on political Islam that is in the Federal Ministry of the Interior. But the Federal Ministry of the Interior, she says, gives them scant funding, and they're barely able to do anything. And a much more lavishly funded group by the Ministry of the Interior is one that is studying Islamophobia. And it's very clear that the German authorities believe that jihad is not so much a problem, Islamophobia is the problem. And this, of course, is something they share with governments all over the Western world.
And the United Nations.
Indeed. No, indeed.
No, indeed.
Strange story out of Belgium, meanwhile, while Western authorities are anxious in every case to exonerate Islam, it also must be noted that Islamic jihadis are often, or actually unanimously, in every case, always anxious to shift responsibility themselves, and generally tend to shift the blame to their victims. And we see this on a large scale with Osama bin Laden and others, noting that the United States or whatever other entity had engaged in some egregious behavior that justified his defensive jihad. And we also see it in small ways. And that's what this is an example of. In Belgium, there was a migrant from Syria who was on trial for the rape of his 8-year-old stepdaughter. And his defense consisted of saying that she was very mature and tried to seduce him. She's 8 years old, David. And so clearly he was used to seeing somebody of that age in a sexual manner, probably coming out of the example of Muhammad, or at least aided and abetted by the example of Muhammad and Aisha. And when he is put on trial for this, he says, well, she's older than that in her head, and she seduced him, because, of course, it couldn't be his fault. It has to be hers. And this goes with also actually Islamic apologetic attempts to claim that Aisha, well, yes, Aisha was 9, but see, she had reached puberty already because it was a hot climate, which is something I've heard many times.
Yeah, even though the hadiths specifically say that she hadn't reached puberty. And even though the Quran itself, Surah 65, verse 4, says that you can marry, divorce, marry, have sex with, and divorce girls all before they've reached the age of puberty. But I've also seen Muslims, when I bring up the issue of Muhammad and Aisha, do the same thing and try to blame Aisha and say, but she was flirting with him and giving him the look and so on. I'm just thinking, a 6-year-old, six. It would not matter. I mean, if a 6-year-old girl was flirting with a 50-year-old man, 50-plus-year-old man, you need to tell her parents about that, because the girl's got some issues.
Yeah, it's incredible. But meanwhile, out of Finland, we have the Finnish politician, and what's her name? I don't know how to say this. Jutta Urpilainen. You, all you Finns who are watching, please put the proper pronunciation in the comments. But in any case, Utah tweeted last week, a couple weeks ago actually, visiting the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi was a breathtaking experience. And she's got a picture of herself happily smiling in the mosque and wearing a hijab. And she goes on to say, one feels small and humble in this beautiful place, which embodies Islam's message of peace, diversity, and tolerance. Now, David, when you think of Islam, are those the first three words that spring to mind? Do you
Yeah,
think those
yeah,
Islam?
they're from Surah 115. Unfortunately, it was eaten by a sheep, and so you're just left with all the calls for the violent subjugation of the entire world.
Yes.
That was that one chapter that just got abrogated. It came after. Yeah, because it was eaten, but yeah, it came after everything was peaceful and would have trumped everything, but then a sheep ate it.
Yeah, you know, in the Critical Quran, I have two apocryphal Shiite surahs in an appendix. And I remember when I was going through them and getting them ready for the book, thinking, gee, this is a shame. You know, this is just Shiite propaganda. And it's kind of a missed opportunity. There's so many things they could have put in there. If they're going to start adding chapters to the Quran, imagine what you could say.
Mhm.
But all I said was Ali is the man, and you know he's the real guy, and don't believe these caliphs. Anyway, moving on to various other jihad activity and more dumb infidel stories. We have a jihadi in Germany, identified as Serkan P, who attempted to burn the synagogue in Ulm to the ground. And after the blaze was extinguished, he fled to Turkey. And even though it would be easy to extradite him from Turkey and put him on trial, the federal and state governing officials in charge have done nothing to bring him back from Turkey and nothing to pursue the case at all. And I'll bet you know why they haven't, David. They are afraid of being called a name.
Hmm, that's
Can you
interesting.
imagine what that might be?
Uh, I'm going to go with Islamophobe.
That is correct for $100. It's just astonishing, really, how you do it. And the German authorities are so afraid of the charge of Islamophobia that they're going to let the Ulm synagogue be torched and not make a move, not lift a finger to apprehend and prosecute the known offender. Many stories out of India this week, quite a lot of tensions there. And in one case, a group of people went into a Hindu temple. They vandalized it. They damaged the idol, as we saw in another story last week. And they hoisted an Islamic flag inside the temple, a flag saying there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. Even then, when I reported this story, I saw on Twitter some people saying, well, anybody could have put that flag there. And I think, well, yeah, you know, David, sometime when you're free, we really ought to go into a church and replace the American flag with the Shahada flag, because that's what Christians do.
Yeah, that reminds me of once Hatun got hit in the face, and then but they didn't catch the guy, and so everyone said, but it turns out it was a Christian who did it, and
Oh, of course.
there were some of the speakers corner Muslims who admitted that it was indeed a Muslim and that they know him, but the lie spread faster than the truth, as it so frequently does with Islamic dawah. And so to this day, I get comments, "Ha, it was actually a Christian," and then the same thing when she was stabbed. It was actually a Christian who did it, and so they just they anyway, they keep doing this. They're probably going to say it was a Christian who stole her Quran because he's upset. And so the idea is there are all these Christians who are enraged at Hatun for making fun of Muhammad, and they keep attacking her and stealing her stuff. And then ironically, it's the Muslims who cheer for the Christian who does this stuff.
Ironically.
Yep.
To be sure, I could give you a list, David, of many Christians who were enraged that I dared to co-host a Muhammad art exhibit and cartoon contest back in 2015, and thought that it was terribly insulting and harmed the Muslim Christian dialogue. They did not understand the whole idea that you enunciated earlier, that if you give in to violent intimidation, you're only going to encourage more.
And that's
So
why
if,
and that's why those two Christians showed up with AK-47s to kill you.
yes, because they were so offended that we were harming the dialogue. The reality is that if when people are saying you can't draw Muhammad or we'll kill you, if nobody is going to draw Muhammad after that, then they're going to come back again later and say, now you can't do X or we'll kill you. And it just keeps advancing. Sometime you have to call a halt or you're just going to get more.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, meanwhile, let's see. In Burkina Faso, David, this past week, a group of men, that's how they are identified in the news story from AFP.
Men. Watch out for those men, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, right. Men. No women were involved. They burst into a baptism ceremony in a church in Burkina Faso and opened fire, murdering 8 people. Now, if you look at a map and you see where Burkina Faso is in relation to Nigeria, and you think about what kind of people might want to kill people at a baptism ceremony, I'm thinking that the chances are about 105% that this was Islamic jihadis. But here again, not a word, not a hint of that generally in the reports. I did find one that said suspected jihadis, and I think that's a more than justifiable suspicion. Armed men also acted in the Democratic Republic of the Congo this past week, killing 14 civilians in a couple of raids in the eastern part of the country. And this was blamed on the Allied Democratic Forces. Often the Allied Democratic Forces are a group that appears in news stories without any further identifying information. They are actually, despite their name, they are an Islamic State ISIS group that is dedicated to waging jihad in order to impose Sharia over the area of Central Africa in which they operate, Central and West Africa. And so the Allied Democratic Forces killed 14 people in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In another case, the same group, the Allied Democratic Forces, ambushed 3 vehicles that Christians were riding in and murdered over 10 Christians. And here again, the specific targeting of Christians also would give any attentive reader a good clue as to who was involved. But most people don't really pay all that much attention nowadays.
Absolutely true. Let me take just because I don't know how long Fatima Williams will be tuning in. Respond to a quick comment here because it proves a point. Fatima says, not true. The Quran was completed before the Prophet's death, and it was memorized by very many. So it was never changed, unlike the Bible, which have hundreds of editions and revisions, 10% diff per edition. And you just wonder why it's always the most clueless people in the world who talk the most about things that they don't know, right? Like people who get all their information from Zuckernick and from horrible websites, the ones who try to educate people the most. But let me just read a couple of passages from Muslim sources. This is Ibn Abi Dawud's Kitab al-Masahif. Many of the passages of the Quran that were sent down were known by those who died on the day of Yamama, the Battle of Yamama. Abu Bakr sent a bunch of people who knew parts of the Quran into battle, and they were slaughtered. So many of the passages of the Quran that were sent down were known by those who died on that day, but they were not known by those who survived them, nor were they written down. Nor had Abu Bakr, Umar, or Uthman by that time collected the Quran, nor were they found with even one person after them.
Whoops.
So notice that you have in the Muslim sources, they talk about this. They talk about originally it's based on the idea of memorization. We're all just going to memorize the Quran and memorize parts of the Quran, and you've got this part memorized and I've got that part memorized. And then a bunch of the people die in battle, and they specifically say, and since the Quran hadn't been compiled by that time, parts of the Quran were lost forever. Muhammad's companion Ibn Umar, when he saw later on people claiming that they memorized the entire Quran, he told them, he said, don't ever say that you've memorized the entire Quran, because how do you even know what it is when so much of it has already been lost? And you see examples of this all over the Muslim sources. So let me just give you an example right here. This is Abu Ubaid's Kitab Fada'il al-Quran. Aisha said, Surat al-Azab, Surah 33, used to be recited in the time of the Prophet with 200 verses. But when Uthman wrote out the codices, he was unable to procure more of it than there is in it today, i.e. 73 verses. More than 100 verses were lost from that one chapter of the Quran. Why? Because a bunch of the people who had it memorized died in battle. And of course, there's this famous passage, Sunan Ibn Majah, 1944. It was narrated that Aisha said, the verse of stoning and of breastfeeding an adult 10 times was revealed, and the paper was with me under my pillow. When the Messenger of Allah died, we were preoccupied with his death, and a tame sheep came in and ate it. You can go to the hadith. These verses, the verses of stoning an adulteress and of breastfeeding an adult 10 times, these are supposed to be in the Quran. These are in the Quran according to the hadith. They refer to these Quran passages. They're not in your Quran today. What happened? Aisha's sheep ate them. Allah couldn't protect the Quran from a sheep, Fatima, and you're here educating us on the perfect preservation of the Quran. This is what happens when you don't bother to study and you just try to explain everything. As far as your other comment, the Bible's been changed. Well, check out Surah 3, verses 3 to 4. Where Allah says that he's the one who revealed the Torah and the gospel. You can check out Surah 6, verse 115, where Allah says that no one can change his words. You can look at Surah 7, verse 157, where Allah says that during the time of Muhammad, Jews and Christians still had the Torah and the gospel. You can go to Surah 5, verse 43, where Allah tells Jews that they don't need Muhammad because they still had the Torah. They still have the uncorrupted Torah. You can go just a few verses later, Surah 5, verse 47, where Allah tells Christians that they don't judge by the Quran. They're supposed to judge by the gospel, which only makes sense if they judge by the gospel. You go a little later to Surah 5, verse 68, where Allah says that Jews and Christians have no ground to stand upon unless they stand upon the Torah and the gospel, which makes no sense if these books have been corrupted. And so, Fatima, so you're sitting here, you have no clue what you're talking about when you talk about the Quran. And when you complain about the Bible, you're attacking your own God and calling him a lying idiot. This is why you study first, then come here and start challenging everyone, right? Study first, then come challenge everyone. But you're not going to do that, are you? You can't help yourself. You're just going to keep commenting and embarrassing your prophet. But go ahead. All right, go back to you, Robert. We'll probably hear more from Fatima here in a second. with more factually verifiable information she got from some lame YouTube video.
Incidentally, I believe it must be a very old one because, I remember hearing, there again, this is old stuff. Hearing 20, 30 years ago, I remember some guy saying the Christians revise their Bible every 5 years and send out the new edition. Where are you getting this? This is total fantasy. But this was circulating around, the idea that the Christians are constantly revising the Bible. That's 20, 30 years ago stuff. I don't know what old material she's accessing. Incidentally, also, I think that Aisha, it's very convenient probably that the tame sheep ate the breastfeeding passages. She probably just didn't want to end up having to breastfeed a lot of strange men.
No, Aisha, according to the hadith, Aisha seemed, of all Muhammad's wives, Aisha was the one who complained about that least, but Muhammad's wives were flipping out about the idea that in order to be around a grown man, they're going to have to breastfeed him 10 times, and that this was supposed to alleviate any sexual frustration because then he'll feel like your son. He'll feel like your son if he sucks on your breasts and will no longer be sexually attracted to you. And then the verse, and then the verse of stoning, of course, Aisha was almost on the receiving end of that verse. She was almost stoned to death. So just think about this. You've got this verse in the Quran about breastfeeding adults, and all Muhammad's wives are flipping out over this, thinking this is like the stupidest thing any man has ever come up with. And then you've got the verse of stoning an adulteress, and they're all terrified of that because Aisha was almost stoned over an accusation. And then, I mean, she literally says that Muhammad died. They're preoccupied with his death, so they're preparing Muhammad, and oopsie, the only copy was eaten by a sheep.
Yep.
Oopsie poopsie.
How convenient.
People have pointed this out many times that this is like the 7th century version of the dog ate my homework.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
But nevertheless, it's been perfectly preserved. Allah sent that sheep to eat the parts he didn't like. Nom, 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 nom.
The parts Satan inspired.
Yeah. Satan tricked him into revealing those, but Allah rescued the truth with the sheep.
Yes.
What
He's
a religion.
the best deceivers.
He is the best of all deceivers.
Okay, so we got more dumb infidels in the Mumbai High Court in India. On trial, an ISIS operative named Mohammed Raisuddin, and he swore an oath of allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the late caliph of the Islamic State. And the court examined this in his trial, as that was the basis on which he was arrested, and they decided, oh, that's not incriminating. That's no big deal. Anybody might swear allegiance to ISIS. So that was the end of that.
Yeah. I just wanted to do one. I can't help myself, Robert. I just got to do one quick follow-up with Fatima. We just quoted Sunan Ibn Majah to her. We quoted Aisha to her. And this is all over. This is all over the hadith. I mean, there's passage after passage after passage about this in Sahih Muslim, about this breastfeeding an adult passage. And I literally just quoted Aisha talking about it. What does Fatima say? Such rubbish. Breastfeeding for 2 years is what the Quran said. Hey, listen to what she just said. Ha! Aisha's a lying idiot, is what she just said. And all the other hadiths, Sahih Muslim, these are all rubbish. It's all a bunch of rubbish sources. The early Muslims, they were the biggest bunch of liars the world has ever seen. But me, a girl who's never studied anything in her entire life, obviously, I know better than Aisha. I know better than Muhammad's wives. I know better than Muhammad's companions. I know better. It's modern dawah in a nutshell, by the way.
Maybe Miss Williams is a Shiite.
Possibly.
Doesn't make Aisha.
Hey, Fatima, are you a Shia? You can go ahead, Robert. I'll wait for her response. But Fatima, are you a Shia? And so are you calling all these Sunni sources rubbish? But you actually
It could be. Could happen.
Yeah,
Anyway.
she says there isn't fake hadith. Oh, there are fake hadith, but that's not a fake hadith. And if you're that's why we're asking if you're a Shia, because if you're a Sunni and you're rejecting Islam's most trusted Sunni hadiths, then we're wondering what your issue is. All right, go ahead, Robert. Sorry about that.
If you are a Sunni and you're rejecting these things, then you are a Shia, because that's what they're called. You know, the Rafidites, the rejectors. So they're rejecting early caliphs.
Unless she's a Quran only Muslim. You've heard of these guys. Yeah.
All 5 of them. Anyway, we're coming up to the end of the hour, so I'll go through the brisk jihad tour once again. In Mali, 132 civilians massacred in jihad attacks on 3 villages. In Nigeria, Muslims wearing police uniforms kidnapped 6 Catholic pilgrims from a pilgrimage site. The wearing of the police uniforms is one of 2 things. One is they were police, which is entirely possible, given the fact that the president of the country, Muhammadu Buhari, is a member of the Fulani tribe that is waging relentless jihad against non-Muslims in Nigeria, or they were practicing Muhammad's dictum, war is deceit. Either way, the pilgrims were kidnapped. In France, at a train station, a Muslim screaming. What was he screaming, David?
Peace and love. No, I'm not going to go with that. I'll go with Allahu Akbar.
You're right. Allahu Akbar it is. You're going to be the all-time Jeopardy champion, really. And anyway, he started throwing stones. An eyewitness says, "We were on the platform. They stopped all the trains because a madman was on the tracks. He took gravel in his hands and threw it violently against the SNCF equipment, towards the platforms where there were a lot of people, towards the security personnel. The police took some time to intervene. They probably didn't want to appear Islamophobic." And the witness goes on, "He was dangerous. He made a speech that we did not understand. He said, Allahu Akbar." And nobody understands that either. In another case in France, a Muslim screaming. What was he screaming, David?
I feel like I'm definitely going to get one of these wrong by just going with my gut every time. But I'm going to say Allahu Akbar.
I don't know how you. It's uncanny, but in any case, he jumped out of the bushes with a knife, screaming Allahu Akbar. The knife wasn't screaming it; he was screaming it, and he attacked a couple of police officers, who were able to subdue him. In Afghanistan, a very popular YouTuber out of Afghanistan. Interestingly enough, I didn't know there were YouTube stars in Afghanistan, but in any case, this fellow Ajmal Hakiki, he was beaten for for insulting verses of the Quran. And he was made to apologize with bruises all over his face after beating by the Taliban. And he said, "We have been promoting Western culture and values, and for this, I apologize." And I thought it was noteworthy, since most of the people who are the self-appointed or elected guardians of Western culture and values would insist that there is no incompatibility between Islamic culture and values and Western culture and values, and that those who think so are vicious Islamophobes. But clearly, the Taliban, which is a very self-consciously observant Islamic government, thinks so as well. In Nigeria, a Catholic priest was gunned down by Islamic jihadis. In Iran, where the Ayatollah Khomeini very famously said, "There is no fun in Islam, there are no jokes in Islam, there is no humor in Islam," 10 teenagers were arrested for participating in Go Skateboarding Day. In Indonesia, also because there is no fun in Islam, a nightlife chain called Holy Wings, apparently some sort of club, but in any case, they were offering a free bottle of gin to women named Maria and men named Muhammad, and were duly charged with blasphemy, because we all know that men who are named Muhammad are all the prophet of Islam, and consequently to offer them a free bottle of gin is blasphemous. In Nigeria also, 13 scrap metal scavengers were murdered by Islamic jihadis. In Italy, 2 Muslims were plotting a jihad massacre. One of them was put under house arrest and the other was set free. They don't want to appear Islamophobic. In Lebanon, the interior minister ordered security forces to crush Pride Month events. Yet again, showing the weakness of this leftist Islamic alliance. In Pakistan, interestingly enough, Pakistan is an Islamic republic and generally implements Sharia all around the country in every detail, but the Pakistani Taliban has warned that if they are not free to implement Sharia in its fullness, we will wage a countrywide jihad. In Bangladesh, a mob of jihadis was menacing a young Hindu student over Nupur Sharma, I believe, and the principal stepped in and was made to wear a garland of shoes, which of course is a tremendous insult and humiliation in Islamic cultures. And so this was a Hindu teacher defending a Hindu student, and was publicly humiliated for saving him from the mob, you would have thought that all the moderate Muslims would have stepped in and stopped any kind of violence in that case. In India, another YouTuber, actually, a Muslim YouTuber with 303,000 subscribers, called for rape and beheading of various people he thinks are blasphemers or supporters of Nupur Sharma. And that, I believe, takes us through most of the jihad for the last week. There is quite a bit more, but we've come to the end of our time, and so we can leave it there.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, Robert, but notice all of that information about the attacks in African countries. We don't hear a lot about things in France where it's, someone slaps someone or even someone stabs someone. But it's interesting that you can have like mass murders in Africa, jihad mass murders, and it seems like they're every week. And we never hear about any of those. Whereas, like, a tailor gets killed in India and we hear about that. And it just really seems that like reporters just don't care what happens in Africa. They just do not care about African Christians. They do not care about any other African group that is getting slaughtered in the name of Allah. But I mean, except for like, I think the Chibok girls where there was a mass kidnapping and stuff like that. Apart from that, you almost never hear anything. I mean, you'll go 2 or 3 years without hearing anything about Africa, and yet it's just relentless every single week. There are these attacks there. And it's like, I don't know, it seems like they just don't care.
That's right. There's no doubt about it. And also it shows how far the jihad is advanced, that you don't see this in Europe, you don't see this in India on this kind of regular basis, but in a few years, you will.
Mm-hmm. I can't resist. Before we close out, Fatima says, this is the response, ladies and gentlemen. So Fatima says, in response to us pointing out the fact that the early Muslim community referred to these verses of breastfeeding adults, in response to that, Fatima says, aha! As the Quran said that a woman breastfeeds for 2 years, then naturally that hadith is fake, all caps, so you know she means it, because the Quran triumph the fake hadith. Now, how is this done? Let me count the ways. So Fatima seems to be aware of the idea that if something were a clear contradiction of something in the Quran, Muslims would go with the Quran. This is not a contradiction at all. It's not within a million miles of a contradiction. The Quran says, yes, you breastfeed your baby, you breastfeed a child for 2 years. That has nothing to do with Muhammad's command to breastfeed adults, which was, again, revealed as part of the Quran. In fact, it was revealed in 2 verses of the Quran because it was revealed as 10 and it was revealed as 5 because so many people complained about the 10. But those verses were both in the Quran at the time of Muhammad's death. And then a sheep ate all these verses on these topics. But what was this about, Fatima? Because you don't seem to be familiar with the issue and you think it's contradicting some claim about breastfeeding babies. Muhammad's companions started coming to him saying, hey, I have to go away for business. And as I'm going away for business, my wife is at home. Only problem is we've got this young stud who works around our house. And I'm worried that my wife is going to do something while I'm gone. What do I do, Muhammad? How can I know that I can trust my wife around this man while I'm gone? Muhammad went to Allah about it. And Allah revealed, as part of the Quran that you're saying has been perfectly preserved, tell the woman, so you order your wife to breastfeed the man that she has to be around 10 times. And after she breastfeeds him 10 times, he'll technically be like her son. And therefore, you don't have to worry about them having sex while you're gone. So just have your wife stick her breast in this guy's mouth repeatedly, over and over again. Hey, don't forget to come over tomorrow. You gotta suck these breasts again. Just have him keep coming over to breastfeed from your wife. Then he's not going to be attracted anymore because he's going to be thinking, "Oh, mommy," and then everything's fine. This is Allah's solution. Fatima, you understand that this is completely insane and idiotic, just like Aisha did, just like Muhammad's wives did, just like every woman and 99.99999999999% of all the men in history would immediately recognize this as insane and idiotic. What does that say about your God and your prophet? Because they thought this was a brilliant solution. Here we go. And so the hadith that you're calling a lie, Sunan ibn Majah 1944, it was narrated that Aisha said, "The verse of stoning and of breastfeeding an adult 10 times was revealed, and the paper was with me under my pillow. When the Messenger of Allah died, we were preoccupied with his death, and a tame sheep came in and ate it." You're calling that a lie. You're saying what are you saying? Aisha lied. You're saying that other people lied because it's all over. Sahih Muslim 3597. It was narrated that Aisha said, among the things that were revealed of the Quran was that 10 breastfeedings make a person a mahram. Then that was abrogated and replaced with 5 definite breastfeedings. And the Messenger of Allah passed away when this was among the things that were recited of the Quran. Notice what she just said here. The Messenger of Allah passed away when this was among the things that were recited of the Quran. This was the part of the Quran when he died. What happened? Why isn't it recited today? A sheep ate it. She had the only copy. This is what's in your sources of about your perfectly preserved book. And you're calling it a lie. Why? Because the Quran says, well, breastfeed babies. You say, all this stuff about breastfeeding adults have to be lies, even though it's all over our sources. My goodness, this, ladies and gentlemen, we're pointing this out for a reason. Islam is spreading with this nonsense, with this totally clueless nonsense. People have never read any of their sources. They've never read anything on the history of the Bible. They've never read anything on the history of the Quran. They've never read anything about how the Quran affirms the inspiration, preservation, and authority of the Bible, and they just keep going out and spouting complete nonsense. They haven't caught up with the times. This is some amazing stuff. Man, I can't do this, but I want to keep reading these breastfeeding passages because I have a ton of them about breastfeeding adults. There's even the one where a woman complains and says, but Muhammad, he has a beard, talking about breastfeeding this guy. He says, Muhammad, he has a beard. And Muhammad smiles and says, I know he has a beard. What a creep, man. What a creep. All right. Sorry about that diversion, ladies and gentlemen, but you gotta take time to enjoy the little things.
Well, Fatima's waging a jihad here, so it's perfectly on topic.
Yeah, that is jihad against the brain, apparently. But isn't all jihad against the brain, Robert? Ultimately.
No, indeed, David.
No, indeed. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Robert, we haven't figured out what are we going to do next week.
What indeed, David? What are we going to do? We could host it on my channel with no one watching. That would be a shame.
I think we should try that and see. We should try it for a few weeks and see if we can get people on board.
Okay. I'm game.
And I can even make a separate video ahead of time and tell people where to find us for this week in Jihad.
Okay, great.
And we'll probably have fewer at the beginning, but I mean, ultimately that it might long term be better because that's the kind of content you deal with regularly.
Okay.
All right, we're going to try it, ladies and gentlemen. So next week, because keep in mind this channel is being destroyed. At least as far as me. So I will add the link. I haven't, what do I have? I have Jihad Watch. Yeah, I will add a link to Robert's YouTube channel, and then subscribe to that channel so you and get notifications, because looks like we will be there next week. We'll try it on Robert's channel for a while. And one last comment from Fatima. Never, ever have we heard about adult being breastfed. You go to Muhammad's companions all over the place. You go to the hadiths all over the place. If you say we've never heard about this, that means you don't know with your sources, because you can't go to your sources without seeing this. And this is hilarious. What is Fatima just saying here? What does she say? Guys, what has she admitted? She just admitted that she has never gone near one of her sources. She's never gone near Sahih Muslim. She's never gone anywhere near Sunan Ibn Majah. She's never gone anywhere near the tafsir. She has no clue what she's talking about, and yet she's telling us about the history of the Quran. So someone who has never in her life spent 5 seconds studying the history of the Quran is here trying to educate people, one of whom literally wrote the Quran. Wow. One second. Fatima, you see this? See that guy right there? That's the guy who's right there on the other side of the screen from me. You've never studied. Open this book. It will be filled with things you've never heard, because wherever you get your information, they don't show you this stuff. And what's amazing, and it will always be amazing to me, is you can have no clue what you're talking about because you get all your information from people like Zakir Naik. We can show you your own sources and show you exactly what your prophet, your God, your prophet's companions, your prophet's wives, we can show you what they said and that they all agree 100% with what we're saying. And when we show you what your prophet, your God, your prophet's companions, your most trusted sources say, your response is, ha ha, idiot, I've never heard any of those things that my God, my prophet, and my prophet's companions and my most trusted sources have said. Therefore, I'm going to go with the lame websites where I get all my information from, believe them, and I'll believe that you guys who are actually quoting my God and my prophet's companions and my most trusted sources, and I'll believe that you're liars. This is, Fatima, if you've learned nothing else today, learn this. There should be a light switch turning on right now, right? The reaction should not be, these guys are quoting all of my sources to show me that my God and my prophet's companions, they all said this. But the people where I get my information from, they're not familiar with any of this. Okay. There are two possible reactions here. One, we're just making up all these sources, even though we gave you the sources and you could go look them up right now. We gave you the information. So you can conclude that we're liars, ignore what we said, never bother going to your sources, because you never have before, obviously. You can just completely avoid your sources for the rest of your life and say, they're liars because that wasn't on the website I go to. Or you can have this light switch moment where you realize, wait a minute, David and Robert have all of this information that's in my most trusted sources. It came from my God. It came from my prophet. It's there from my prophet's companions. But the people where I get my information from lied to me about all of that. That means that I can't trust these people who keep lying to me. I need to listen to the people who are actually quoting my sources to me. That's the light switch moment, because here's what happens, Fatima. Once you realize the people who've been giving me all the information I've ever had all my life about my religion are the biggest bunch of liars the world has ever seen. What does that mean? It means I cannot trust them, but my entire basis for trusting my religion has been these liars lying to me. Maybe I can't trust them anymore, and maybe I need to go investigate this stuff for myself. And the second that light switch turns on, Fatima, you are on your way out of Islam. Might take a day, might take a year, but you are on your way out of Islam as soon as you break free from the lies. That's why we're here. We're here to help you, even though you insult us, even though we point out how dumb you are with this. And I don't mean intelligence-wise, I just mean information-wise. You have no clue what you're talking about. You're here trying to educate everyone. Ultimately, this is not to attack you. If you have no clue what you're talking about, you need to be told that you have no clue what you're talking about. That's not an insult. That's telling you the reality about yourself. So we are here ultimately to help you, not to deceive you. Everyone who's telling you about your religion and telling you all these lies, they're lying to you. We're telling you the truth. For some strange reason, you love the liars and you hate the people who tell you the truth. And somehow your religion convinces you to do this. But if a religion convinces you to love lies and hate the truth, what's that tell you about the religion? Catch y'all later.